Hi there, welcome to Play Fantastical. This week we're going to be talking a little bit about Hamlet. Right now I'm doing a read through of the Bible in a year, and while I was doing my daily reading recently, I came across this passage. And David took these words to heart and was much afraid of Achish, the king of Gath. So he changed his behavior before them and pretended to be insane in their hands, and made marks on the doors of the gate and let his spittle run down his beard. Then Achish said to his servants, "Behold, you see the man is mad. Why then have you brought him to me?" Now, I thought I knew the story of David decently well, but I had no memory of this happening. And so, of course, reading this, my mind went straight to another man who's in line for the throne, who pretends to go mad to avoid suspicion. Hamlet, Prince of Denmark. This was a surprise for me. I mean, the connection seemed so obvious, yet in all my studies of Hamlet, I had never come across any scholarship that pointed to a connection between 1 Samuel and Hamlet. That might be because calling it a source for Hamlet is taking it a step too far. Like, Odysseus pretends to go mad to try to avoid going to the Trojan War, but that doesn't mean he's a source for Hamlet. Not every person pretending to go mad ever is necessarily a source for Hamlet. And yet, as I kept reading 1 Samuel, I kept finding more and more moments where the story of King David aligns with some plot points from Hamlet. The similarities do not end at this scene where he's pretending to be mad. There are so many more. And in fact, while I was pulling through 1 Samuel looking for these connections, I actually found a lot of connections also to Macbeth, to King Lear, even Romeo and Juliet. And so, since Shakespeare would have studied the Bible, I feel like all these connections are fair game. For this video, I'm going to be using the Geneva translation going forward, because that's the Bible that Shakespeare most likely would have owned, read, studied, and familiar with. So let's get into it then. To tell the story of David, the second king of Israel, you really need to start with Israel's first king, Saul. Now, Saul is thought to have been king from 1048 BC to about 1009 BC. Up to this point, Israel has been ruled by judges, but Israel decides that they want a king because they want to be like the nations around them. Now, wanting a king is already kind of like a rejection of God as king, so we're not starting on a great path here. Like, why would you want to put yourself in subjection to a king when you could just kind of the Lord as your king? So despite the fact that this is not a God-pleasing thing, the Lord consents and he anoints Saul to be the next king through Samuel, the judge. Now, Saul's qualifications to be king always seem a little shaky to me. Like, when he's introduced, he's really just pointed out to be like tall, dark, and handsome. And he had a son called Saul, a goodly young man and fair, so that among the children of Israel there was none goodlier than he. From the shoulders upward he was higher than any of the people. So saying that he's like a head taller than anyone else in the whole country. And like that's what makes him the king. I mean, the Lord anointing him makes him the king, but like that's his distinguishing feature, is like his height. So gotta respect him. Honestly, I kind of feel bad for Saul. He was not out here like trying to become the king. And actually, the day that he is proclaimed the king above Israel, he is hiding in like a pile of baggage. They had to drag him out of hiding to like crown him king. When they sought him, he could not be found. Therefore they asked the Lord again if that man should yet come thither. And the Lord answered, Behold, he hath hid himself among the stuff. And they ran and brought him thence, and when he stood among the people, he was higher than any of the people from the shoulders upward. Being king, especially being the first king, means that you've got a lot of eyes on you. A lot of the people even seemed skeptical that Saul could rule over them, saying, How shall he save us? So they despised him and brought him no presents, but he held his tongue. Just a tall, gangly guy trying to like hide in some baggage. This guy, he's supposed to be our king? Not so sure about that. Especially since Saul is going to turn out to be the villain of our story later on, I think it's important to highlight how good and how promising a king he was at first. God gave him another heart. Saul clearly has the favor of God with him, and in chapter 11, it says that the Spirit of God came upon Saul. He is clearly God's elect, and he receives the favor of God in battle. He saves a city that's under siege, and after he does this, at this moment, he becomes fully accepted by the Israelites as their king. It's also important to note that Saul is working really closely with Samuel the prophet throughout these chapters. So he's in alignment with the Lord's wishes here at the start. But then he begins to make mistakes. First, he makes an unlawful sacrifice in chapter 13. And this is a big deal because the Israelites have a lot of rules regarding how sacrifices are made and where they're made. In trying to make the sacrifice to get something in return from God, he actually is breaking the rules, and God is not pleased. Because of this unlawful sacrifice, Samuel actually tells him that his kingdom will not continue forever. War and other battles continue. And we have another episode where Saul almost ends up having to kill his son, Jonathan, because he makes a stupid oath, right? He says something stupid like, oh, if anyone eats anything today, surely he shall be put to death. And then his son didn't hear him and ate some honey. So you're seeing Saul become more and more of an imperfect leader, right? His flaws and his sinfulness just keep popping out in different places. And this all culminates actually with the Lord's rejection of Saul. So it's not just, your kingdom won't continue forever, but God's spirit actually kind of departs from Saul. So through Samuel, the Lord commands Saul that when he goes out to fight the Amalekites, he needs to smite them, just completely blot them out. Now therefore go and smite Amalek, and destroy ye all that pertaineth unto them, including their ox and sheep, both camel and ass. This is a very intense command, as a wipe them out, women and children included, and all their possessions too. Saul, though, doesn't end up doing this. He doesn't want to do it. And this isn't because he's feeling super merciful or anything like that. He's not oh no, Lord, please spare these people. It's because he wants to keep the cows for himself. Then came the word of the Lord unto Samuel, saying, It repenteth me that I have made Saul king, for he has turned from me and hath not performed my commandments. And Samuel was moved and cried unto the Lord all night. God regrets making Saul king. Samuel is devastated, and he goes to tell Saul the news. And Samuel said, Hath the Lord as great pleasure in burnt offerings and sacrifices as when the voice of the Lord is obeyed? Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to hearken is better than the fat of rams. For rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft, and transgression is wickedness and idolatry. Because thou hast cast away the word of the Lord, therefore he hath cast away thee from being king. Now, I feel pretty bad for Saul here. He has lost God's favor, and he's lost the kingdom with it. As Samuel turns to leave, Saul desperately tries to grab onto Samuel's robe, and it rips. Then Samuel said unto him, The Lord hath rent the kingdom of Israel from thee this day, and hath given it to thy neighbor that is better than thou. And Samuel came no more to see Saul until the day of his death. But Samuel mourned for Saul, and the Lord repented that he made Saul king over Israel. And here you can kind of see Saul's villain arc begin in earnest. It's a very, very mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all? And the mirror says, not you, right? Your neighbor who's better than you. Someone out there is better than you, and they're going to take the kingdom from you. And that someone is David. Saul continues as king, even though he's lost God's favor, and David, meanwhile, is anointed by Samuel to be king of Israel. He ends up working for Saul as a harp player, but the Spirit of God departed from Saul, and an evil spirit sent of the Lord vexed him. And so when the evil spirit of God came upon Saul, David took a harp and played with his hand, and Saul was refreshed and was eased, for the evil spirit departed from him. So here you almost have kind of a Duke Guercino festy scene, right? He's oppressed with this evil spirits, and the music kind of casts this demon out of him. But of course, at this point, Saul doesn't realize that David is the fairest of them all, the one who's coming to dethrone him. Next, we get to maybe the most famous part of the story, David versus Goliath. The Israelites are up against the Philistines, and the Philistines have challenged Israel to single combat, right? Just have one person from each army come out, fight each other. Whoever wins, wins the entire war. The problem is Goliath is super scary, and no one thinks they can beat him, including Saul. Saul doesn't think he can beat him. Saul should be the one who's out there fighting on behalf of Israel, but he's too scared. He thinks he's going to lose. Meanwhile, David rolls up. He's just like bringing something to his brothers. David's not even old enough to really be a soldier. And yet he's the one who volunteers to go out. He hits Goliath with his slingshots and then cuts off his head. David is so successful on the battlefield here and in future times that he gains this elevated status. And David went out whithersoever Saul sent him and behaved himself wisely, so that Saul set him over the men of war. And he was accepted in the sight of all people and also in the sight of Saul's servants. Saul's son, Jonathan, also becomes friends with David at this point, and he becomes almost like a Horatio figure to David's Hamlet. The soul of Jonathan was knit with the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul. And Saul took him that day and would not let him return to his father's house. Then Jonathan and David made a covenant, for he loved him as his own soul. And Jonathan put off the robe that was upon him and gave it David, and his garments, even to his sword, and to his bow, and to his girdle. This feels similar to what we hear Hamlet say to Horatio prior to the play within a play scene. Jonathan is a prince, and David is a nobody, right? In a similar way to how Hamlet is a prince and Horatio is a nobody, but he's elevated by this friendship that knits their souls together. Horatio, thou art e'en as just a man as ere my conversation coped withal. Nay, do not think I flatter. For what advancement may I hope from thee that hast no revenue but thy good spirits to feed and clothe thee? Why should the poor be flattered? Literally, Hamlet is calling Horatio poor here. He's like, why would I flatter you? You can't give me anything. Like, it's just my pure heart of love for you. Since my dear soul was mistress of her choice and could of men distinguish her election, she hath sealed thee for herself. Give me that man that is not passion's slave, and I will wear him in my heart's core, I in my heart of heart, as I do thee. You can see Shakespeare use this like knitting of souls idea also in the relationship between Rosalind and Celia in As You Like It. Celia, in this case, is the cousin with more power, right? Her dad is the Duke. Rosalind is a nobody. Her dad is banished. But she is the one who is knitting her soul to this unknown, this unimportant, this poor person. You know my father hath no child but I, nor none is like to have. And truly when he dies, thou shalt be his heir. For what he hath taken away from thy father perforce, I will render thee again in affection. By my honor I will. And when I break that oath, let me turn monster. Therefore, my sweet Rose, my dear Rose, be merry. And Celia also says to Rosalind, you lack then the love which teacheth thee that thou and I am one. Shall we be sundered? Shall we part, sweet girl? No. Let my father seek another heir. Hamlet's relationship with Horatio could also be coming right from Orestes and Pylades, or Achilles and Patroclus. Feels like every tragic hero needs a best friend who they completely love. And again, as I said before, it's a little hard to pick out kind of who the real prince is in this scenario. Because, yes, Jonathan is the prince, but David is the anointed. So they both have this kind of princely quality to them. At this point, Saul is already starting to be a little bit jealous of David, especially when the Israelites come up with this catchy song and they're always singing it. And the lyrics are like, Saul hath slain his 1,000 and David his 10,000. So they're like belittling Saul here. Saul, having lost the Spirit of God with this evil spirit that's afflicting him, right? He actually attacks David. He throws a spear at him twice, while David is just like playing the harp for him as usual. He's trying to like pin him to the wall so that he can kill him, but David escapes. And Saul was afraid of David because the Lord was with him and was departed from Saul. Saul is afraid of David. Now, I don't know if we exactly get the sense that Claudius is afraid of Hamlet, but I think there's definitely something there. But I don't think we ever get the sense that the Lord is with Hamlet. We have no sense that God has like ordained Hamlet to be the next king of Denmark. In fact, there's a real question of whether Hamlet actually has an evil spirit of himself. The ghost that he's seen, right? He's got the ghost of the king of Denmark past on his side, but is that like a holy influence? Or is that maybe something darker? Claudius, however, seems to know that the Lord is not with him. Right? He goes through his whole speech trying to pray, right? Trying to ask God for forgiveness, but he's unable to because he doesn't actually repent, right? He wants to hold on to his power and his queen, so he can't actually turn and give up all that he's gained. It also doesn't seem like he's that sorry for having killed his brother, right? Like he's never like, oh, I feel so bad that my brother's dead. It's a much more selfish kind of guilt. This element of jealousy, though, I think is definitely present in Claudius. We especially see this when he talks to Laertes, explaining why, hey, I'm actually not able to kill Hamlet because of the great love the general gender bear him. You can't actually take action against Hamlet because he's too popular. Whether or not Claudius is lying there about Hamlet's popularity, it's hard to tell, but David definitely has some popularity working in his favor. Saul might not be able to come out and just kill David, but the Philistines can. It's in a similar way to how Claudius thinks, oh, I might not be able to kill him, but England can. Do it, England. Do it, Philistines. Knock this guy out for me. Saul just keeps sending David into battle with like terrible odds, but David keeps coming out alive and like in triumph. Saul even tries to set a trap with his daughter, Michal, saying that David can't marry her unless he kills 200 Philistines. Again, like he's hoping David will fail. It's like the impossible quest, right? Like Jason being sent to go get the golden fleece. He's supposed to fail and he's supposed to die in the process, but instead he succeeds with the power of God, and he gets to marry Saul's daughter. At this point, Saul has had enough of just like trying his luck with the Philistines, and he's actually talking about killing David outright. And his son Jonathan says, no, no, Dad, please don't do that. Why would you do that? Jonathan is able to talk his dad out of it for the moment, but pretty soon Saul is like throwing the spear at him again while he's just playing the harp. He misses, but this time he actually makes plans to follow David to kill him at his house. In a very Romeo and Juliet moment, Michal, Saul's daughter, gets to protect David. Saul also sent messengers unto David's house to watch him and to slay him in the morning. And Michal, David's wife, told it him, saying, if thou save not thyself this night, tomorrow thou shalt be slain. So Michal let David down through a window, and he went and fled and escaped. It's that goodbye scene from the balcony. And window, let day in and let life out. Romeo says, farewell, farewell, one kiss and I'll descend. Michal, just like as a side note, she's pretty awesome. She helps him escape with like Ferris Bueller levels of creativity. Then Michal took an image and laid it in the bed and put a pillow stuffed with goat's hair under the head of it and covered it with a cloth. It's at this point in the story that I think I actually stopped trying to see Saul in the light of Claudius, because he was so clearly transforming into a Macbeth kind of figure. Saul has still been chasing David, right, since he escaped from the window, but David is supposed to attend this feast. It's the feast of the first of the month. I guess he's supposed to just laugh off this spearing attempt like the other ones and come back like it's normal, right? If he doesn't show up, he's probably in a state of rebellion, right? So he's supposed to be there, just like everyone is supposed to show up for this big fancy feast that Macbeth is throwing. David finds a way to talk to Jonathan and say, hey buddy, your dad is gonna kill me. I can't come to this feast. Jonathan wants to think the best of his dad, and so he says, let's find a way to test this. They actually come up with a bit of a mousetrap, I guess you could say. It's not exactly like play within a play standards, but they have this kind of script that Jonathan's going to work through. And based on Saul's reaction, they're going to know what his intentions are. Was it really just a temporary lapse with that whole evil spirit, or is he like actively, maliciously seeking for a way to kill David? When David doesn't show up, if Saul asks for him, Jonathan is supposed to say, oh, David asked my permission to go make sacrifices with his clan, and that's why he's not here. And if Saul gets really upset at this, that means he wanted to kill David. But if he's fine with it, then we know things are all good. And David said unto Jonathan, behold, tomorrow is the first day of the month, and I should sit with the king at meat. But let me go, that I may hide myself in the fields until the third day at even. If thy father make mention of me, then say, David asked leave of me that he might go to Bethlehem to his own city. for there is a yearly sacrifice for all that family. And if he say thus, it is well, thy servant shall have peace. But if he be angry, be sure that the wickedness is concluded of him. Again, it's not exactly a whole play within a play, right? Like there's not a ton of actors out here, but it is a similar test. And the Horatio figure is there to kind of gauge the reaction of the king. I prithee, when thou seest that act afoot, even with the very comments of thy soul, observe mine uncle. If his occulted guilt do not itself unkennel in one speech, it is a damned ghost that we have seen, and my imaginations are as foul as Vulcan's stithy. David needs evidence that Saul is trying to kill him, just like Hamlet needed evidence that Claudius had killed his father, and maybe also evidence that he's trying to kill him. Any evidence in these cases is helpful. So they're both out here playing detective. And of course, the fact that it's happening at this feast, though, really points us in the direction of Macbeth. Macbeth and Saul are in super similar positions here, where they're both king, but both of them have been told that their kingdom is not going to last forever. Macbeth knows that Banquo's children shall be kings. That's what the witches said to Banquo. He knows Banquo's sons are supposed to be the king, so he needs to watch out for this guy. Likewise, you can kind of imagine Saul thinking, hey, I want my son to be the king. David is a threat to that. He's a threat to Jonathan, to my heirs. Much like Saul, Macbeth is out there throwing a feast, but he definitely knows where Banquo is, or knows where he hopes he is, because he's hired murderers to go out and kill him and his son Fleance. At the feast, though, Banquo's seat is empty, right? And he makes a big ado of calling out Banquo's absence. Here had we now our country's honor roofed, were the graced person of our Banquo present, who I may rather challenge for unkindness than pity for mischance. Already he's like trying to call Banquo out for not being there. The trouble is, of course, Macbeth then sees the ghost of Banquo sit down at the feast with like blood and gore all over him, and he totally freaks out, freaks everybody else out too. Saul doesn't see the ghost of David. His hitmen haven't been successful so far, but you can definitely imagine him at the feast kind of making similar toasts of like, where is that guy? Like, it's kind of a disgrace that he's not here, right? What does he mean by that? I drink to the general joy of the whole table, and to our dear friend Banquo, whom we miss. Would he were here. Now, the first night of the feast, Saul actually does not ask about David. He just assumes he couldn't attend. Maybe he was unclean. You have to follow kind of certain rituals in order to be able to attend the feast. But on the second day, he does ask. And Jonathan springs the mousetrap. He says, oh, I let David go back to Bethlehem to sacrifice with his family there. Saul, in his response, makes things crystal clear about where he stands in regards to David. Then was Saul angry with Jonathan, and said unto him, Thou son of the wicked rebellious woman, do not I know that thou hast chosen the son of Jesse to thy confusion, and to the confusion and shame of thy mother? For as long as the son of Jesse liveth upon the earth, thou shalt not be established, nor thy kingdom. Wherefore now send and fetch him unto me, for he shall surely die. And Jonathan answered Saul his father, and said unto him, Wherefore shall he die? What hath he done? Saul lays into his son Jonathan for giving so much favor and preference to David, when David is the one who's about to take his throne from him. Saul clearly sees David as an obstacle to his son taking the throne. And these are words that you can also kind of see echoed in As You Like It. Duke Frederick, when he's banishing Rosalind, he says to Celia, his daughter, she, Rosalind, is too subtle for thee, and her smoothness, her very silence and her patience speak to the people, and they pity her. Thou art a fool. She robs thee of thy name, and thou wilt show more bright and seem more virtuous when she is gone. This town ain't big enough for the both of Jonathan and David, according to Saul. Saul even throws his spear at his own son after this conversation. He's that angry. It's actually kind of hilarious to me how many times it's recorded that Saul is like throwing his spear at somebody, like indoors, right? Just makes me think that like, A, he always has that spear close to him, like it's always within his reach. And then B, you gotta think he's actually not super good at like aiming it. Like if you're in a room with someone to like miss them with the spear this many times, Jonathan has to then deliver the news to David, because unlike Hamlet, David is not able to actually sit and watch the reaction of the mousetrap himself. The two of them had concocted kind of a pretty elaborate plan for relaying these results. So David's not actually in Bethlehem, he's actually staying out in like a field outside of the palace. And they decided that on the third day, Jonathan would go and shoot some arrows. And based off of what he said to the kid who's going to like collect the arrows afterwards, they would know the results. Then said Jonathan to him, "Tomorrow is the first day of the month, and thou shalt be looked for thy place shall be empty. Therefore thou shalt hide thyself 3 days, then thou shalt go down quickly and come to the place where thou didst hide thyself when this matter was in hand, and shalt remain by the stone easel. And I will shoot 3 arrows on the side thereof, as though I shot at a mark. And after I will send a boy, saying, Go, seek the arrows. If I say unto the boy, See, the arrows are on this side thee, bring them, and come thou, for it is well with thee, and no hurt, as the Lord liveth. But if I say thus unto the boy, Behold, the arrows are beyond thee, go thy way, for the Lord hath sent thee away." When the time comes, Jonathan shoots the arrows, and he tells the boy, the arrows are further beyond, which means that it's not safe for David. He's got to get out of Dodge. Now, maybe this is a little bit of a stretch, but I can't help but think of Edmund and Edgar, actually, when I read this scene. Edgar and Edmund are half-brothers of the Duke of Gloucester in King Lear. Rather than their souls being knit together, Edmund is actually a total villain. He has been so cunning and created this rift between his father and his brother. His brother Edgar being in line to inherit, he's trying to drive this wedge between them so that he can get in there and take the money and the titles and everything, right? The whole inheritance will be his if he can get rid of his brother Edgar. First, he talks to his father, and he convinces his father, even though he seems not too excited about it, he seems reluctant to tell his father that his brother Edgar actually wants him dead. And then he goes to his brother Edgar, and he makes sure that Edgar has no chance to defend himself, that he just has to flee, and in fleeing, he actually looks more guilty. "My father watches. Oh, sir, fly this place. I hear my father coming. Pardon me. In cunning I must draw my sword upon you. Draw. Seem to defend yourself. Now quit you well. Yield. Come before my father. Light ho here! Fly, brother! Torches! Torches!" Edmund has this like pretend fight with Edgar on his way out the door to make himself look like the hero, right? Or like the victim, right? Edgar's the real bad guy here, Dad. See? Now, of course, Jonathan is such a different character from Edmund. Jonathan, you could just tell he has got such a good heart, but they are delivering the same kind of news. You can't come back in here because my dad's trying to kill you. So again, like there's this thread of a Shakespeare play found in this book of Samuel. When Edgar flees, he takes on the disguise of poor Tom. Poor Tom is mad, right? He's like Tom of Bedlam from an insane asylum. David, however, fails to disguise himself, and he's recognized at the very first place he stops. And this will turn out to be a very bad thing. He stops in Nob, and when he stops, the head priest, Ahimelech, is so scared that he's trembling when he comes out to meet David. Then came David to Nob, to Ahimelech the priest, and Ahimelech was astonished at the meeting of David, and said unto him, Why art thou alone, and no man with thee? To have a man like of the status of David traveling by himself with like no servants, no companions, nothing, it's really suspicious. Like something has clearly gone terribly wrong. David's traveling alone. He doesn't have food. He doesn't even have a sword. He ends up asking Ahimelech, like, hey, does anyone have like a sword lying around? And it turns out they actually have Goliath's sword from earlier. So he gets to like take the sword of the guy he killed at the start of this whole thing. And this actually is when David gets to Gath, and we have the passage that finally like clicked for me. Oh, this feels super Shakespearean. David's in Gath, and he gets recognized. Now, Gath is a city in the Philistines. Again, David is like known for killing Philistines. And so to be recognized there is super dangerous. And David arose and fled the same day from the presence of Saul, and went to Achish, the king of Gath. And the servants of Achish said unto him, Is not this David the king of the land? Did not they sing unto him in dances, saying, Saul hath slain his 1,000, and David his 10,000? And David considered these words and was sore afraid of Achish, the king of Gath. Yeah, it is a pretty bad look to show up in the land of your enemies and expect, like, what kind of welcome are you expecting, David? And he changed his behavior before them and feigned himself mad in their hands, and scrabbled on the doors of the gate, and let his spittle fall down on his beard. Then said Achith unto his servants, Lo, you see the man is beside himself, wherefore have ye brought him to me? Have I need of madmen that you have brought me this fellow to play the madman in my presence? Shall he come into mine house? Pretending to be mad allows David to escape from Gath unscathed. It's funny, I feel like a lot of English classes like raise the question of like, why the Antic Disposition, Hamlet? It doesn't make one-to-one sense in our mind. Like, this happens, therefore I'm going to pretend to be crazy. Requires a couple leaps in there. It kind of comes out of the blue in the text. Like, he doesn't talk about this plan at all beforehand. Here, as before, never so help you mercy, how strange or odd soe'er I bear myself, as I perchance hereafter shall think meet to put an antic disposition on, that you at such time seeing me never shall, with arms encumbered thus, or this head shake, or pronouncing some doubtful phrase as, well, well, we know, or we could, and if we would, or if we list to speak, or there be, and if they might, or such ambiguous giving out to note that you know aught of me. Honestly, it seems like Hamlet gets so caught up in the ghost that like afterwards he's just already acting weird, and he never spells out exactly why he puts on the madness. In David's case, it's pretty obvious. He is avoiding being recognized as the warrior who slew tons of Philistines. For Edgar, too, when he disguises himself as poor Tom, it's very much because he has the need to disguise himself. But Hamlet, he can't really disguise himself, right? He's still recognized as the Prince of Denmark by everybody. He can't like go into hiding here. I suppose it's more that he's disguising his mind and the inner workings of it. And yet, I almost feel like pretending to be mad makes him seem more suspicious. But Hamlet's madness is also of a different kind. David pretends to like go slack-jawed. He's like letting the drool dribble out of his mouth. Hamlet is like crafty, right? He's a thinking madman. Which again, like, and sometimes his words ring slightly true. He's a scarier madman, I think, than David ends up being. David is going slack-jawed, and Hamlet's jaw just will not stop moving. Shifting back over to Saul, though, Saul is having a totally Macbeth moment. Saul is raging at the men around him that David's been able to get away, until Doug the Edomite says, actually, David was over at Nob with Ahimelech, the priest. And Saul said unto his servants that stood about him, Hear now, ye sons of Gemini, will the son of Jesse give every one of you fields and vineyards? Will he make you all captains over thousands and captains over hundreds? That all ye have conspired against me, and that there is none that telleth me that my son hath made a covenant with the son of Jesse? And is there none of you that is sorry for me, or sheweth me that my son hath stirred up my servant to lie in wait against me, as appeareth this day? Then answered Doug the Edomite, who was appointed over the servants of Saul, and said, I saw the son of Jesse when he came to Nob, to Ahimelech and the son of Ahitub, who asked counsel of the Lord for him, and gave him victuals, and he gave him also the sword of Goliath the Philistine. Remember Ahimelech, who was so scared when David showed up there by himself? He had good reason to be, because as soon as Saul learns about this, that David received support from them, he takes his revenge on all of the priests of Nob, not just Ahimelech. Then the king said, Thou shalt surely die, Ahimelech, thou and all thy father's house. And the king said unto the sergeants that stood about him, Turn and slay the priests of the Lord, because their hand also is with David, and because they knew when he fled, and shewed it not unto me. But the servants of the king would not move their hands to fall upon the priests of the Lord. Then the king said to Doug, Turn thou and fall upon the priests. And Doug the Edomite turned and ran upon the priests, and slew that same day 75 persons that did wear a linen ephod. Also Nob, the city of the priests, smote he with the edge of the sword, both man and woman, both child and suckling, both ox and ass, and sheep with the edge of the sword. So Saul kills 85 priests, along with all of the women and children and infants and the animals too, which brings to mind, of course, that awful scene in Macbeth, where Macduff's family is brutally murdered, including the children. Macbeth orders this to happen. From this moment, the very firstlings of my heart shall be the firstlings of my hand. And even now, to crown my thoughts with acts, be it thought and done, the castle of Macduff I will surprise, seize upon Fife, give to the edge of the sword his wife, his babes, and all unfortunate souls that trace him in his line. Macbeth has his enemies' children killed, and all for what? For nothing. It serves no purpose except for cruelty and massacre. Likewise, Saul killing all of these priests. I mean, there's no going back from that. What an absolutely blasphemous thing to do, in addition to being just horrendous. Macduff, his reaction is so heartbreaking. He asks, my wife killed too? He has no children. All my pretty ones. Did you say all? Oh, hell kite, all. But all my pretty chickens and their dam at one fell swoop. Any semblance of Macbeth's moral compass is just completely gone at this point, right? There's no hemming and hawing. Oh, is this a dagger which I see before me? No, he is all in for evil at this point. And that's kind of what it looks like for Saul here too. This is cruel, calculated mass murder. Both David and Macduff blame the slaughter on themselves. One person, I think the son of Ahimelech, survives to come and tell David what happened. And David said unto Abiathar, I knew it the same day when Doug the Edomite was there that he would tell Saul, I am the cause of the death of all the persons of thy father's house. Likewise, Macduff, oh, he's just beating his breast. Sinful Macduff, they were all struck for thee. Not that I am, not for their own demerits, but for mine, fell slaughter on their souls. Now Saul just continues to devote himself to pursuing and trying to kill David. And this is where we get the next scene that I think is clearly resonant with Hamlet. Saul is finally closing in on David. He's got 3,000 men with him, and he came to the sheepcotes by the way where there was a cave. And Saul went in to do his easement, and David and his men sat in the inward parts of the cave. And the men of David said unto him, See, the day is come, whereof the Lord said unto thee, Behold, I will deliver thine enemy into thine hand, and thou shalt do to him as it shall seem good to thee. Then David arose and cut off the lap of Saul's garment privily. And afterward David was touched in heart, because he had cut off the lap which was on Saul's garment. And he said unto his men, The Lord keep me from doing that thing unto my master the Lord's anointed, to lay mine hand upon him, for he is the anointed of the Lord. So David overcame his servants with these words, and suffered them not to arise against Saul. So Saul rose up out of the cave and went away. Is this not like the scene where Hamlet walks in on Claudius praying and thinks about killing him, almost kills him, and then walks away? Now might I do it, Pat. Now he's praying, and now I'll do it. The only reason Hamlet stops, though, is that he doesn't want Claudius to go to heaven, right? He wants Claudius to go to hell. So it's not out of the goodness of his heart that he stops and doesn't do the murder. It's actually the opposite. It's the darkness in his heart that prevents him from committing murder there. Now, Saul wasn't being particularly pious when David had this opportunity to kill him. He's not praying or anything. Actually, modern translations have him kind of he goes into the cave to use the bathroom privately. But still, David will not bring down the sword over Saul's head. It's possible, reading it, there's a possible reading that maybe he did try to kill Saul, or that he swung the sword somehow and ended up cutting some of the garment off instead, the Lord stopped him from doing it. But it could also be that he just went and cut off some of his garments, and that was his plan from the get-go. I don't think it's super clear in the text which way, but it's obvious that once he's cut some of the cloth, he goes back to his men and he says, there's no way. Who am I to kill the Lord's anointed? Even though he's kind of this terrible guy who's tried to kill you and anyone who's helped you. David also arose afterward and went out of the cave and cried after Saul, saying, O my lord the king. And when Saul looked behind him, David inclined his face to the earth and bowed himself. And David said to Saul, Wherefore givest thou an ear to men's words that say, Behold, David seeketh evil against thee? Behold, this day thine eyes have seen that the Lord had delivered thee this day into mine hand in the cave, and some bade me kill thee. But I had compassion on thee, and said, I will not lay mine hand on my master, for he is the Lord's anointed. Moreover, my father, behold, I say, the lap of thy garment is in mine hand. For when I cut off the lap of thy garment, I killed thee not. Understand and see that there is neither evil nor wickedness in me, neither have I sinned against thee, yet thou huntest after my soul to take it. David is able to use this moment to prove that he's not after Saul. He's not trying to kill Saul. Hamlet, though, ends up leaving some evidence that he definitely does mean to kill Claudius, namely the corpse of Polonius, right, who he thought was the king. And the king clocks this too. He says, "It had been so with us had we been there." The evidence is leading in different directions for Hamlet and David. David isn't on a revenge mission. David and Saul actually reconcile here, and Saul is crying. He is totally put to shame by David's righteousness. When David had made an end of speaking these words to Saul, Saul said, "Is this thine voice, my son David?" And Saul lifted up his voice and wept, and said to David, "Thou art more righteous than I, for thou hast rendered me good, and I have rendered thee evil." It feels like it goes back to the very beginning where God says, where Samuel says, God is giving his kingdom to someone better than you. He admits it, right? David, you are better than me. If only the story would end there with like Saul's conversion, but of course it does not. He falls back into his own Macbeth-like ways again. He goes out a second time, again, just like hunting David, and David again spares his life. David and one of his men, they go down to Saul's camp in the middle of the night, and they see Saul sleeping. And he's got his spear right next to him so that he's ready to just like throw it at anybody at any time. And they steal his spear, and they steal also, I think, his water flask. His companion told him to kill Saul, right? But David, again, he refuses to raise his hand against the Lord's anointed. David has this really great sense that blood will beget blood, right? That like blood guiltiness and this like cycle of revenge and violence, that's never going to end anywhere good, which is a sense that seems to elude Hamlet and many other tragic figures. Saul, again, like kind of sheepishly the next day when he sees David has his spear and his water flask, he says, "I have sinned. Come again, my son David, for I will do thee no more harm, because my soul was precious in thine eyes this day. Behold, I've done foolishly and have erred exceedingly." David can't trust him, though. Even if Saul is sincere in this moment, he's just going to change sides again. And this is where David actually becomes kind of a Coriolanus prototype. He ends up thinking, okay, where can I go where Saul is not going to chase me? He says, actually, I need to go over to the Philistines. Maybe I can like be of some use to them, help them in some of their different wars. And Saul, I mean, there's no way he's getting into Philistine territory to pursue me, right? That's the only place I'm going to be safe anymore, which again, reminds me of Coriolanus, the Roman hero who like single-handedly won so many battles for the Romans, only to be like humiliated and kicked out of the city, banished, right? And so he goes and he joins the enemy forces, the Volscians. David actually goes back to the king of Gath, the same guy who he had previously like pretended to be insane in front of. And he does such a good job fighting for the Philistines that the king of Gath, Achish, believed David, saying, "He hath made his people of Israel utterly to abhor him. Therefore he shall be my servant forever." Achish believes that David has done so much killing now on the Philistine side that it's impossible that David could ever go back to the Israelites. Achish actually makes David his own bodyguard. Like, that's how much he trusts him. We fast forward a little bit later, and the Philistines are gathering against Israel. And Saul is freaking out. The Lord is not answering him anymore. And so again, he pulls a super Macbeth move and he turns to witchcraft. He goes to see a medium, even though like being a medium or a necromancer is totally illegal under his reign, his own laws. It's a form of blasphemy. And just like Macbeth, he doesn't just talk to the witch. He gets the witch to raise somebody up for him to talk to. Say if thou wouldst rather hear from our mouths or from our masters. Macbeth, call him, let me see him. And Saul gets this medium to call up the spirit of Samuel. Samuel has long since passed away. But he actually disturbs the spirit of Samuel to talk to him because he can't get a hold of the Lord. We do get the sense that he's actually talking to the spirit of Samuel. Like wherever Samuel's resting place is with the Lord, The Lord lets him go back to talk to Saul, even though it's clearly like blasphemous. This is not a good thing that Saul is doing. And Samuel does not beat around the bush. He does not comfort Saul with false hopes. He doesn't equivocate with them the way that like the witches' apparitions do. He doesn't puff up his like pride or ego. He gives it to him straight. And Samuel said to Saul, "Why hast thou disquieted me to bring me up?" And Saul answered, "I am in great distress, for the Philistines make war against me, and God is departed from me, and answereth me no more, neither by prophets, neither by dreams. Therefore I have called thee, that thou mayst tell me what I shall do." Then said Samuel, "Wherefore then dost thou ask of me, seeing the Lord is gone from thee, and is thine enemy? Even the Lord hath done to him as he spake by my hand. For the Lord will rent the kingdom out of thy hand, and give it thy neighbor David. Because thou obeyest not the voice of the Lord, nor executest his fierce wrath upon the Amalekites, therefore hath the Lord done this unto thee this day. Moreover, the Lord will deliver Israel with thee into the hands of the Philistines. And tomorrow shalt thou and thy sons be with me, and the Lord shall give the host of Israel into the hands of the Philistines." Then Saul fell straightway all along the earth, and was sore afraid because of the words of Samuel, so that there was no strength in him, for he had eaten no bread all that day, nor all the night. Samuel tells Saul that he's going to die in this next battle. And it almost feels like the parade of ghosts that appears before Richard III, the night before his great battle. It's like the ghost of all the people he's killed come to him, and they say, "Despair and die." And Saul does. He actually asks his armor bearer to kill him. And when his armor bearer refuses to do that, he falls on his own sword. Like he doesn't want to be taken into the hands of the Philistines and suffer God knows what. It feels like a shame that he doesn't get to go out fighting the way that Macbeth does. Macbeth says, "I will not yield to kiss the ground before young Malcolm's feet, and to be baited with the rabble's curse. Though Burnham would be come to Dunsinane, and thou oppressed, being of no woman born, yet I will try the last. Before my body I throw my warlike shield, lay on Macduff, and damned be him that first cries, hold enough." Macbeth gets to go out with this like epic battle cry. Saul, though, goes out with a whimper. And the thing is, when the Philistines find him, they decapitate him just the same, just the way they did to Macbeth. I do feel it's important to note that even though David was on the Philistine side, he's actually not fighting with the Philistines in this particular case. The Philistines actually reject him before this battle. They don't want David anywhere near any of this because they don't trust him. Achish, the king, trusts him, but the other generals don't. And so David is kind of like released from duty, basically, and he ends up going to fight the Amalekites, funnily enough, the same people that Saul was supposed to totally wipe out, in kind of the same timeline as Saul is dying. Achish called David and said unto him, "As the Lord liveth, thou hast been upright and good in my sight, when thou wentest out and in with me in the host. Neither have I found evil with thee, since thou camest to me unto this day. But the princes do not favor thee. Wherefore now return, and go in peace, that thou displease not the princes of the Philistines." And David said unto Achish, "But what have I done? And what hast thou found in thy servant, as long as I have been with thee unto this day, that I may not go and fight against the enemies of my lord the king?" Achish then answered and said to David, "I know thou pleasest me as an angel of God, but the princes of the Philistines have said, Let him not go with us unto battle. Wherefore now, rise up early in the morning with thy master's servants that are come with thee, and when ye be up early, as soon as ye have light, depart." There is no kind of epic showdown. There's no battle at the end between Saul and David. Again, David's made it clear that he does not want to raise his hand against the Lord's anointed. Kind of a missed dramatic moment there, I guess. But the story continues in 2 Samuel, which I am not going to touch here. I really thought that this was going to be a short video. Like, I really thought I would just look at the moment when David pretends to be mad, and maybe the moment when he, is hovering with his sword above Saul, because those are the key moments that seem so Hamlet-like. But the more that I looked at 1 Samuel, the more Shakespeare I saw there. I think by my count, I've referenced like maybe 7 or 8 different Shakespeare plays. And I'm just looking at like the surface level. Like this is not me like digging super deep to find the least obvious ones. To me, these are all kind of on the surface strings that you can just start pulling. Even though Hamlet and David have their similarities, they are of course also extremely different. I think they're very similar in their love of words. It's funny, you don't see David loving words a ton in 1 Samuel, but as the author of so many Psalms, you know that guy is a poet. And Hamlet also is a poet in so many of his speeches. They both have this affinity for words. Yet, I think you could argue that David is more so a man of action. He's actually leading battles. He's killing people throughout. He's a real warrior in a way that Hamlet is not. Hamlet gets his revenge at the end. He actually kills Claudius, right? Whereas David is doing everything in his power not to kill Saul. You can see David as kind of glorious and righteous and triumphant, successful, and these are all words that I don't think really get applied to Hamlet. You can almost see Hamlet as kind of a failed David. He gets caught up in that cycle of violence and blood guiltiness in a way that David is able to avoid. It is also not my intent here to just like compare these two as characters. Shakespeare's rendition of Hamlet is very much made up, whereas there's actually evidence that David lived and like walked the earth. Whereas Hamlet, that's a little more sketchy. After Saul's death in like 1009, 1010 BC, David would go on to rule over Israel until 970 BC. Reading 1 Samuel though this time, I think I was just so struck by the epic proportions of the story. Like I was reminded kind of frequently too of Homer's Iliad. What's really interesting to me is, okay, so the Trojan War would have taken place about 1200 BC. Again, different area of the world, but still interesting to think of like the time period and what else is happening in the world at this time. If Saul's reign began at about 1048 BC, that means there's only about 150 years separating the Trojan War from kind of the start of our story here. What's also interesting though is that Homer, it's thought, didn't compose the Iliad and the Odyssey until 750 BC. So like, over 200 years after David's death. So the Trojan War happens in 1200 BC, but doesn't get written about until like 500 years later. Whereas Samuel is written as such like a history, right? Because it's actually thought to have been written in like 970, or like the compilation of it finished in 970 BC. So the writing is a lot more in like real time versus like a poetical reconstruction of it happening. It's probably actually like historians from David's time writing and compiling the book of Samuel. Whether or not Shakespeare was truly inspired by the events of 1 Samuel, it's impossible to know for certain. Definitely the influence of the lost Hamlet by Saxo Grammaticus, and then the history of Hamlet written in French by Belforest. These are much more obvious sources for Hamlet. Take place in Denmark. It's got a lot more hallmarks of the actual story. Yet Shakespeare would have definitely had familiarity with the Bible too. Perhaps these like threads of similarity, they just lend biblical proportions to the tragedies that he writes. So I'm super curious, what do you think? Was this like way too much of a stretch? I think I might have just gotten really carried away with that one section. But I'm also curious, like, have you ever heard of this parallel before? I've studied Hamlet like a decent amount, and this has never been at the front of my mind. Has this come up in any of your like Hamlet education experiences? Because it was certainly a new idea for me when I encountered it. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Bye.